Hey, welcome back to the month of creativity. I'm going to revisit our daily word for just a second because it's actually the topic that we're talking about today. In this case, creativity of healing. It says, there is no obvious consistency in the healings of Jesus. Some involve laying of hands, while other at times healing is achieved at a distance. All Gospels report a variety of healings taking place, yet none explain how Jesus did his work. There are a bazillion different modalities of healing out there. Just runs the gamut. In fact, if you go to a healing class, pretty soon that teacher, if they have their own modality or are really adept at that modality, will have other teachers of that modality that have taken their little bent to it and added their take on it, which is actually absolutely perfect because in the end we're all aligning with what works for us. But I think we get into trouble when we think that one modality and one way is better than the other, and forgetting that there wasn't even one way for one of our greatest teachers and masters. Not at all. It all developed from the people who were seeking. And sometimes it was just his presence in the area that allowed for people to express that they were healed. Other times there was physicalness involved and mixing up of mud and laying on of hands and what we would call miracles. And sometimes, like in Mark 5, we have a lady that says, if only I do this, if only I touch the cloak, I will be healed. And sure enough, she gets close enough to touch the cloak, and Jesus says, your faith has healed you. Well, what the heck is the faith? Which faith? If we take faith as the idea of it's your own personal understanding of your own personal existence and your own personal alignment with Source, that's your faith. And your faith, your recognition, your alignment with Source allows for the healing. Whichever way you choose for that to happen. But then we get into all kinds of, well, what is healing to begin with? Is it when somebody walks away and their broken bone is healed? Is it all of a sudden the blind is seeing? Is it what we talked about last week with the gentleman that did the miracles show and the people were having actual physical results during his show? Or is it more than that? The Daily Word says, whatever the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms, faith in a new and unlimited possibilities allows healing to happen. I was telling Carol before, because you all have noticed you don't have a paper in front of you this week. And I knew the talk would be creativity of healing, and I did a lot of extra research in that vein. And you all know that we're doing extra healing classes this month, and we have a healing service on Wednesdays now, and it just seemed to fit, because that seems, to be where the energy is guiding anyway to express that. So I did some extra research, but then what I found was I didn't know how to get any of it into any kind of on paper thing for you, because in the end it's so individual on how you feel and what you do to work with it that I don't know that can be contained in a paper. I think that's what Stephen Levine, he and his wife did a tremendous amount of work with healing, especially those who were in active dying situations. So he would work with healing with those that pretty much knew because of their ailments, that they would cross soon. Now think about that. A healer that's working with those that are going to cross soon. Seems like an oxymoron, doesn't it? Just a little, that's not what we always think of. And yet he talks about he has passed himself about 3 years ago. And you can find lots of his stuff. And he actually wrote some books with Ram Dass and with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. But he talks about having library in his office and in his home at the time, and all the books with all the modalities and all the different ways you can eat and all the different ways you can exercise and all the different things to do for yourself to bring about healing, energy healing, anything. He had it all. He said the most astonishing thing to him with all of those books was that they were all gifted to him in the wills of the people that had crossed. All of his books on healing that lined his shelves were gifted to him from the estates of the people that he had helped. Wrap your brain around that just for a moment. So, and almost all these books, especially when you're talking about the dietary forms of healing or the exercise forms of healing, most of them, not all, but most of them are going towards that physical recognition of healing. And that's what these people were trying so hard while they were here to manifest for themselves. And yet what Stephen talks about is watching and knowing that healing has totally 100% taken place in some of these people, despite the fact that they crossed over. And to know that death is not the antithesis of healing. So he talks about, and this is his story, it's not mine. He talks about a woman that she was in so much pain that she was ridiculously grumpy. So much grump that she had pushed even her own grown children away from her. And she ended up in a home/hospice situation. And she was so grumpy that even the nurses did not want to go into her room. Ones that are trained to deal with the grumpiness couldn't even get, they just couldn't hardly bring themselves to get near her, to have a conversation. And one night, in her pain, she had pain in her lower back and in her hips. For whatever reason, while she was laying there, she had a vision, a realization, a thought that she was actually a woman that was starving with her newborn with her in a country that just was famine-ridden, that also had the same pain that she did in her lower back and hips. And then she had the thought, the realization, the vision that she was a woman in an Eskimo-type society with the same kind of symptoms, just in a lot of pain. And for her, this went on and off throughout the night. And when the next morning, she was able to express, it's not my pain, it is the pain. The pain that is available for anybody to experience. But then the choice is, what do you do with it once you experience it? Despite being, for her, a pain that was causing her such excruciatingness that she was just ridiculously grumpy. And through that realization of hers, that it wasn't the universe picking on her through the pain, that was an experience for her, she changed the way she viewed the experience. She started offering gratitude that she understood that there was more, that she was part of more, that she wasn't alone, even in that experience, that there were others out there with similar experiences. And Stephen goes on to say that through the next 6 weeks of her stay at that place, her children came back into the room. Her room became such a place of love that that's where the nurses chose to go on their break, just because it felt so good to be in there. And when she passed, Stephen said she had a beautiful passing because she was surrounded by all that love. and her family. But it took her willingness to not just feel and know the pain, but to allow it to an extent to know that she wasn't being picked on with it. It was truly part of the experience for whatever reason. And we go back to the Daily Word, there is no description for some of the reasons. I don't know that we know. Although we do recognize that sometimes it's in our hardest times, our most painful moments, our most grief-stricken moments, the moments where you feel like everything has been totally taken away from you, that there is nothing else to grasp onto, that the openness can happen. Because we're not trying to close ourselves off from what ifs anymore, because the what if happened, it's there. And what else are you going to do other than feel it, know it? And at that moment, it's possible to know something else in ways that maybe we hadn't before. And maybe that is the creativity of healing. It's not that we have to be perfect and have to have the wonderful gym bodies and the perfect diet, and which there isn't anyway, because you all are so unique individuals that you're going to have to figure out which one works for you. There is not one book that's going to tell you exactly what works for you on food or exercise or anything. That's so individual. And sometimes that only realization can happen when you are in the midst of everything you thought was bringing you happiness has been totally taken away. And at that moment, you can be creative beyond belief, because there's nothing else holding you back. Now, what would happen if we could get ourselves to that point without the quote tragedy? Why is it that we need that bottoming out in order to see the rest? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But if you choose to do any extra listening to Stephen's work or reading his books, you'll see story after story of this. So the people that he's come in contact with, people that lost their children and literally out to the ocean, and they find them, and they find that when the body is returned to the parents, that animals and everything else, and how do these parents deal with that? And he sees it over and over again, that bottoming out moment, that taking away of everything that you thought held bliss, and realizing that there's still bliss. It's like in the nothingness, there's everything. In the nothingness, you realize that you are part of that glorious nothingness that is everything. Total blank. And if you have a blank canvas, what can you do with that? Anything. And you get to choose all over again. I think our challenge is to know we can do that at any time. We don't need something in life to bring that total bottoming out and cleaning it off. You can do that at any time. There's a spiritualist healer named Harry Edwards, and he came to similar conclusions, but in a little bit different ways. He started off thinking that he needed one direct line someplace in source. He called it a guide for himself, for control. You may call it an angel or a past, whatever that is for you. But his original thought was he needed that direct line. And the more he worked, he realized if he just got himself out of the way and made himself blank, and allowed the creativity that maybe he did not even know about and understand to work through him, that's when the miracle of healing happened for those around him. Now, interestingly enough, even though he was able to bring that about for countless thousands, they actually have records of books, what happened through his work. His own family dealt with mental illness in a way that just was incredibly heart-wrenching when you read about personal stories. And for whatever reason, he worked through that his entire life while offering all this healing to everybody else. I don't want to throw that out there because he's considered in the spiritualist community one of the, you hold him up as the let's learn about him for spiritual healing. And yet in his own life, he worked it all the time because of the mental illness in his family. We don't have to be perfect, I guess is the message there. You don't have to be perfect. It's the willingness to open yourself up to the creativity that allows for a perfection that's beyond us, maybe to understand during this lifetime. Because I don't know how many times, I'll just give you a tiny little story. Most of you know that I follow the work of Master Robert Pang, and I do study with him when I get the chance. And I'll take people with me to see him, because just to be in the atmosphere of somebody that really wants to help somebody else is amazing. Whether you totally grasp the technicalities of Qigong or not, just the atmosphere alone is worth going at least for a day. And one person that I took with me, when we walked away, I said, so what do you think? Did you have an experience today? And the only comment was, I couldn't use him as my teacher. And when I asked why, she said, well, because he wears glasses. And if he can't take care of that for himself, how is he going to be my healing teacher? So I really sat with that for a long time because I'm like, really? I wear contacts? Do we really have to? And again, that was a human version of perfection in order to connect, to help somebody else. Had nothing to do with the realities of what he understands for his connection and how he can share that with others. So we don't have to be the quote perfect, especially if we're measuring perfect on the human standard of perfection. In order to achieve that alignment for yourself, whatever it is, whatever modality works for you, whatever books work for you, whatever diet works for you, whatever personal spiritual practice works for you. The only cautionary tale is allow it to change as you need it to change, because what works for you now may not work for you next month. And that's part of, I think, our continual alignment and growth process. In the end, healing is allowing that feeling to know that we are part of the universe and bringing ourselves back to that from which we know we're already from, and allowing that manifestation of the love of spirit to show itself here and be felt by those around you and with yourself. That's healing. Be creative in getting there. Y'all can have that blank slate at any second. My 10-year-old went to college for kids this week. And a lot of you know he struggles with a lot of anxiety and self-worth kind of issues and his own ideas of what perfection is. And he asked to go to this class because they were learning how to program video games. And he wants, more than anything, to make his own video games. So we found this course and he went. The first day he went, he came out of the session just bawling, thinking that he wasn't as smart as the other kids. And we had to go over again and again. You've not seen this program before. Remember when you first learned your video game, that he loves this game called Minecraft. I said, remember when you first learned that like 4 years ago? Did you know all the things you do now? We had to go through and it took about 2 hours just to allow him to settle in and know that he was okay and get back on track. The next day was better. Of course, in between them, his oldest brother, who does have a computer degree, sat down with him and showed him some things. Not all that he understood, but at least. And then he had a conversation with them and told him that there was one particular programming class that he took 3 times. And then to further that point, I had to tell the 10-year-old that those classes are 15 weeks long. and he took it 3 times. So you're allowed not to get whatever it is your goal is right away. And then he had a couple of good days. And then we had a day of group work. Well, working with other people, that's just like beyond, at least for this child. He had no idea what to do. So again, it was agony for 3 hours for him because he did not know how to participate in an activity where you had to share ideas. The idea that you could share an idea and somebody else could share an idea and you could work together is just not something that he totally grasped for whatever reason. And then when I was thinking about his meltdown on day 4, how many of us do that anyway? How many of us do not share our unique abilities because we don't know what's going to come back at us, so we just don't say anything? Or we don't do anything. So here I am trying to help the 10-year-old thinking, you know what, his mother does the same stuff. So we all can learn from each other's meltdown, I think, if we allow ourselves. To his credit, he picked himself up and actually did go back for day 5, which he told me was his best day of the whole week. So again, for me, he taught me a lot that week because even though he had 2 meltdowns, he went back every day. He went back, he kept trying. He cleaned the slate, he tried again. Are we willing to do that? Even if our mommies don't put us in the car and drive us there and say you have to give it a shot. Do we allow ourselves that? Do we allow ourselves to be creative in a way that we don't need somebody else on the other side saying, that was the coolest thing I ever heard, let's try that? Can we allow ourselves to say, I'm working through being cool myself with spirit and that creativity? And give it a try. Doesn't mean you're always going to be right, but you've given it a try. Allow yourself to settle in just a second. Take a nice deep breath. Where is it in your life you believe alignment needs to take place? Where is that spot of healing for you? And if it's a physical thing, go ahead and recognize where that is on your body. If it's relationship, if it's mental, if it's a spiritual aspect, doesn't matter what it is. Whatever it is for you. And in the next 4 breaths, intend that there will be a flash bulb, little bright, shining light moment inside of you, giving you a creative way to get yourself into that alignment. And with the next breath, you can open your eyes. Now, whether you felt like you got some kind of response right now or not, go ahead and try this again when you're not under the constraints of humidity. And allow yourself to listen to all aspects of yourself. It doesn't have to be some kind of vision. It could be like Bob shared during his light shining moment and a sign along the side of the road. Or even an extra feeling in our body. Or it could be something later on today that the most unlikely person says to us. And then you have a choice on whether to be creative in that moment and go after that or not. There's no right or wrong answer because you will get more hits all the time. You can't get away from the signs. They're all around us. The universe is constantly being creative for us. It's just what we choose to recognize and go after. Thank you guys all so very much.